So what is it that interviewers care about? They have three basic questions that they want answered. Can you do this job? Will you fit into the company? And will you be a reliable and motivated employee? So the ability to perform. You often don't get to demonstrate your abilities in an interview, although sometimes they will ask you to do a writing test, so you do get to do that. But sometimes the things that are on your resume, you don't get the ability to demonstrate. Interviewers determine your abilities to perform the task through guesswork, what's on your resume, and then talking to your references. A good interviewer is not going to let you get away with being vague and general in your answers. So you need to elaborate and try not to be defensive when they're asking questions about, trying to figure out if you can do the job. With the fit, this because you have the skills doesn't mean you'll be taken seriously as a candidate if the interviewer is concerned about your fit. Your fit into the company is almost always subjective because they want to know if you're going to fit in with the other employees, which is why you may have multiple people coming to meet you during an interview or sitting in on the interview process. And then your motivation. Interviewers are reluctant to hire you if you don't reasonably convince them that you are genuinely interested and enthusiastic about this particular job, company, or industry. And you can display your motivation in two ways. First, through your demeanor. How upbeat and enthusiastic are you about talking about this position with this particular organization? And then second, your ability to demonstrate that you know a great deal about this job, the company, and its industry. So the basics of interview prep. Being prepared means three things. You have a basic understanding of yourself, your values, your skills, your interests. You have an understanding and you're prepared for the fundamental interpersonal dynamics of the interview process. You know how to handle the give and take of Q&A, giving the interviewer time to get the question out before you start responding. Being reasonably knowledgeable about the job and what it requires, again, the company and the industry. And then you got to work on your interview skills. Practice listening. Practice with a friend. Pay attention to understand and absorb what the other person is saying without misinterpreting, jumping to conclusions, or allowing your emotional responses to cloud the objectivity of your responses. You want to develop skills by periodically testing your powers of recall. Can you remember what was said? You also want to practice your responses. That doesn't mean you're going to know the answer to every question or know every question they're going to ask you, but that you know what questions to expect and to be aware of, and be aware of the key points that you want to get across when answering them. You could also record yourself. Videoing is a way to help prepare for an interview. So you want to pay attention to your posture, to your eye contact, how fast are you talking, your emphasis and your tone, and then any distracting mannerisms that you may have. And then you've got to prepare for a specific interview. So you want to find out about the company. What business is it in? What does it do? What are the products or services it sells? The chief competitors and how successful they are in comparison, that your company you're applying with, how successful are they in comparison to their competitors? Who are the key executives and how long have they been with the company? Any specific problems the company is facing or just overcame, the company's values. What's the work atmosphere like? Is it more laid back or is it intense? And some of these are things that you might not be able to know without doing your research, talking to people who already work at the company. Glassdoor.com may talk about some of these things. Obviously, the company's website can tell you the executives. And then, find out also some major events in the industry or company in the last couple of months. So there are different types of interview questions. First kind are closed questions. These are like yes, no, or one-word answers, like, where did you go to school? How long did you work for this company? Your open questions are going to require a little bit more. For example, they may ask, what is it about our company that interests you? Or tell me about your last job. Now, when you're talking about your last job or why you want to leave your current job, you have to be positive. You can't say because my boss is an overlord. You need to, say something like, I'm just not a good fit at this organization, or you just, find some way to be positive about it. It's not, because you don't want to say, again, that it's because of your boss, because then the interviewer may see that as maybe you're the problem because they don't know the situation. So think about, those are the types of questions to think about. Leading questions. Stay focused and don't allow yourself to be drawn into responses that won't help your cause. So, because they may try to bait you to reveal something about yourself, because they can't ask you about your personal life, but as soon as you talk about your personal life, then they can ask you questions. If you mention your spouse or your partner or your kids, then they can start asking you about those things. Trick or off-the-wall questions. These are questions that appear to have nothing to do with the job, but the purpose is to get more information about your character. And with these, it's okay to be creative and humorous, but keep a positive attitude as you would with any other questions. So they may ask you, like, if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? Or my daughter was in an interview and they asked her about if she were a bicycle, what part of the bicycle would she be? So you really have to think about, what are they trying to get at? They're trying to see how fast on your feet you are and how creative you are, but at the same time, they're trying to get more information about who you are. The behavioral questions are designed to reveal more about how you think and operate, but also provide more information about the inner workings of the company. So specific examples of how you handled conflict with former colleagues or in a group project, or how you demonstrated your leadership abilities. Some common interview questions include, tell me about yourself. So these are not, starting from when you were born to today, but just, give them a little information about who you are, that you're a senior Georgia Southern student majoring in public relations, and just something minute about yourself. Why did you leave your last job? Again, avoid defensive responses or answers that show you're bitter towards your former employer. How much do you know about the company? Again, do your research so that you would be able to answer that. Tell me about your last job or your last position. So be enthusiastic, because employers are looking for a direct connection between what you did and what you'll be able to do for them and your motivation. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Mention your strengths as they relate to your job. Be candid about your weaknesses, but also be brief. Remember, don't say that you have time management issues, because yes, that's a weakness, but that's not something that's going to get you a job. You could say a weakness is, I have trouble saying no, which to the employer, they're going to think that's a strength because you have trouble saying no, so you're going to take on more projects. So do some research. Think about how can you turn a weakness, if time management is an issue for you. Think about how you can talk about that in an interview that doesn't sound negative. Where do you hope to be in 5 years? You want to represent a logical career path, but just be careful on how you're talking about it. What do you think you can bring to this company? That's another version of them asking why they should hire you. So knowing what you know about this job and our company, would you make changes if you were offered this position? Basically, they want to know if you're going to rock the boat. So you want to speak in general terms about what your objectives would be. Tell me about your previous boss. Give a thoughtful and diplomatic answer that focuses on their managerial style, and avoid talking about, oh my God, they were the best boss ever, or they were a jerk. Do you consider yourself to be a team player? Employers are looking for insight as to what you consider to be a challenge and to shed some light on how you would handle a challenge. Do you just think about it, or you jump in and take the bull by the horns? Avoid citing problems that have no bearing on the job at hand or show your inability to get along with others. Let's see. What kind of salary do you require? Usually they don't ask this kind of question. They might ask this question, but typically you're not going to get to that until you're discussing salary at a later point. So do your research and find out what is the typical salary for this position, because salary is different based on location. A $30,000 job in Statesboro, that's good money because cost of living is cheaper here. $30,000 in Atlanta, not so much. If we were to hire you, when could you start? Don't be overeager and say that you could start next week or tomorrow. Remember that most jobs, like the job you're currently in, would require at least a 2-week notice before vacating. And even then, you might want to give yourself, especially if you have to move, you may need to give yourself more time between leaving one job and starting the next one. So here's a slide, how to answer the tell me about yourself question. So make sure you read through those do's and don'ts. Handling yourself during the interview. Make sure that there's nothing about your appearance that falls outside what people in the professional or industry would consider the norm. Your goal is to blend in. We'll talk about this further in the professional dress lecture. So controlling those pre-interview jitters. Obviously, you're going to be nervous. It's common to be nervous. It's just what happens. So, but the more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be. Organize yourself ahead of time. Always take some days before the interview to decide what you're going to wear. Make sure it's clean, and if it needs to be, that you've ironed it. Watch the weather. Listen to a weather forecast. See, do I need to bring an umbrella? Do I need to wear a rain jacket? Make sure you have enough gas in your car. And know who you're going to call if you run into a problem. So if you're on the interstate and you have a flat tire, or there's an accident and traffic is backed up, who do you call at that office to let them know? Get a good night's sleep the night before. Go to bed at a normal time so that you get good rest. And then stick to your normal routine. Get up, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, so forth. Pay attention to your breathing. When you're nervous, your breathing becomes more shallow, so you want to make conscious attempts to take deep, slow breaths so that you're not going to pass out. Give yourself more than enough time to arrive punctually. So you want to take a trial drive to the site, ideally at the same time you would expect to be on the road, so that you know exactly what time you need to leave so that you can arrive early. Make sure your car is clean on the inside, because you never know who might walk by your car in the parking lot. And then you want to slow yourself down. Slowing yourself physically sends a message to your brain that will help you relax. And then when you arrive, the interview begins as soon as you arrive at your destination. So here are some do's and don'ts. Don't bring someone with you. Yes, I've heard stories of this. I've seen it myself, although it was at a restaurant still. Don't bring people with you. Don't smoke, eat, or chew gum. Now, if you were eating or chewing gum before you arrived, finish it, breath mint, go in. Try not to smoke before you go inside, because it's going to smell. Don't wear sunglasses indoors. Don't bring a shopping bag or a gym bag to the interview. You want to make sure that you have a professional, if you're bringing your portfolio, that it's in a professional looking case. Don't do your makeup or check your appearance in your compact mirror while you're waiting to be called. Don't brush off the receptionist who tries to talk to you. The receptionist is typically the first person who's interviewing you, because they're going to ask them how did they behave while they were waiting. Also, if the receptionist doesn't talk to you, don't try to make them start a conversation with you. Also, don't use your cell phone. Keep it in your purse or leave it in your car. Always have it on vibrate, but don't play your iPod or read inappropriate literature. So don't bring your 50 Shades of Grey book with you to the interview. What should you do? Well, usually if you're sitting in the waiting room, there's company literature. You should look through that. You should go over in your mind 3 or 4 key points that you want to make during your interview. You've got to be patient, especially if your interviewer is running late. And be pleasant to all the receptionists and the administrative personnel. And if they try to start a conversation, you need to participate and smile. And then you want to get off to a good start. First, it starts with a handshake, which maybe not today in the COVID world, but only extend your hand if the interviewer extends theirs. And the shake should not be too hard or too soft, just right. Breaking the ice. Interviewers are typically sensitive to the awkward moment as an interview begins, and will try to put you at ease with some small talk like, how is traffic, or, how's the weather. Yes, it's part of the interview. They're talking to you, but they're trying to get you to go along with it because they're trying to get you to calm down a little bit. Your interviews are going to fall into 3 categories. First is the screening interview, and this is when they're narrowing down a large number of candidates to a smaller list of top possibilities, and these are most likely to occur on the phone. So you focus on the explanation as to why you want the job and examples that illustrate the skills highlighted on your resume. In the selection interview, the basic qualifications are no longer a primary issue in the hiring decision. The focus is on what you bring to the company in addition to the basic skills. The confirmation interview is when you're the candidate of choice by the hiring manager, but as a matter of courtesy, you're being introduced to the boss before the final offer is made. So when you're answering questions, remember why you're there, to get a job. So take your time in answering questions, and don't wing it. Don't just go in there thinking you don't have to be prepared. Always be prepared. Keep your answers concise and direct, and back up any assertions you have with real-world examples. So if you talk about what you did with social media, be able to back that up and say, we started with 100 followers and I helped increase the social media following to 500. And then pay attention to how your interviewer is responding to your answers. Just, to see if they're enthusiastic. Also watch your body language. Avoid crossing your arms because that's like you're closing yourself off. Don't avoid making eye contact. And be aware of what your face is doing, so don't have tense facial expressions. And then when it's your turn, you want to ask questions that relate to the big picture. Where does the company hope to see itself in a few years? How does the job you're applying for fit into those plans? You could ask the interviewer their own history with the company. How long have they been there? What's the type of person that's likely to succeed in this company? What is the competitive challenge in the industry likely to be over the next several years? From a 2017 U.S. News article, the best 8 questions to ask a job interviewer. How has this position evolved since it was created? If the interviewer says it's expanded over the years, that signifies the opportunity for growth. What have past employees done to succeed in this position? What have you enjoyed most about working here? What's the top priority for this person in this position over the next 3 months? This lets you know what to focus on if you get the position. If offered the position, can you give me examples of ways I would collaborate with my manager? Because as an entry-level employee, you may want to work with management as a means to showcase your skills and move up. What are some challenges that will face the person filling this position? And then, do you have any hesitations about my qualifications? Don't ask them, how did I do in my interview? It's not a question to ask them. Stick to the facts about the job. So don't bluff saying that you need to hear from them soon because you have another job offer. Even if you have another job offer, don't tell them that you have other job offers. Don't ask them to critique your interview. Don't pressure the interviewer into making a decision, or ask them for names of other people you might contact for jobs. What you do need to do is write a follow-up letter as soon as possible. Consider a quick email message, no more than a paragraph, that expresses your thanks until you have a chance to compose a more formal letter, 3 or more paragraphs. Your thank you note should accomplish 3 things. Express your gratitude for the interview, reinforce your interest in the job, and recap the 2 or 3 strongest points that work in your favor. Here's an example of a thank you letter. Now, phone interviews. These can be a little tricky sometimes. They're screening candidates to narrow the field for in-person interviews. So you still want to prepare as you would for a regular interview and be prepared to have a conversation about yourself. So even though you know your resume, it's a good idea to keep it in front of you so that you know what about you. So if they ask you a specific question, have a short list of your accomplishments to discuss. Keep some paper so that you can write down notes. This will help with helping you prepare for future interviews, knowing what questions they asked you. If it's an inconvenient time, ask them to talk another time. Typically, you have scheduled this interview, so always pick a time that's going to work for you. Make sure that you don't have kids or pets in the room with you that are going to distract you or make noises. And again, prepare responses to the typical interview questions. During the interview, don't chew gum, eat, or drink. They can tell. Now, the next point says to keep water handy. So that's just, because your throat's going to get dry the more you talk. But don't make it obvious that you're eating lunch, which is why I say don't eat or drink. Do smile. It is projected through the phone and will change the tone of your voice. Speak slowly, enunciate clearly. Use that person's title, so pay attention when they're making that appointment with you, what their name is. Don't interrupt the interviewer. And this can be hard sometimes when you're on the phone because you don't know if they're pausing for dramatic effect or are they pausing because they're waiting for you to talk. So, just kind of play it by ear and take your time. Be a good listener. And if you don't understand the question that was asked, ask for clarification. Give short answers, and then ask about what's the next step in the interview process, as well as the hiring timetable. And then after the interview, take some notes about what you were asked and how you answered them, and again, follow up with a thank you note so that they know that you're still interested in the job. This was from the Marketing and Communications Women of Atlanta Facebook page. So, to all job seekers, as a person who culls through resumes and devotes time to meetings with candidates, a handwritten note, handwritten thank you note sent immediately afterward is impressive and gets you noticed. In the past, it was a given. Now we barely get a thank you email. Those that sent a handwritten note in a timely manner demonstrate they understand how business works and shows customer service and attention to detail. The human relationship piece cannot be overlooked in our increasingly digital world. So that's from someone in the PR profession and explaining why thank you notes are so important. Skype interviews, which now are probably Skype and Zoom interviews, you still want to treat these similarly to a phone interview. You want to make sure that you're setting up the room so that you know what's behind you, that your pets and your children and roommates are not around. Make sure the do's and don'ts. Make sure that you are dressed appropriately. That means wearing pants. Don't just wear your pajamas. And then, again, send that thank you note when you're done. So here are some examples of don'ts with a Skype interview. I have heard tale of times when the interviewer will ask you to stand because they want to see if you're dressed. There are some do's. Again, and making sure too that your connection works. So you want to test that ahead of time. What do you do if you don't know the answer?